tactical whore who loves to imitate and amalgamate the gameplay of others, or an underappreciated innovator who's set to stamp his own unique mark on the history of football tactics? Just who is Arne Slot, and more importantly, how good is he?
Ball back to Timon Wellenreuter.
The key to understanding Arne Slot's approach to football is through his fascinating approach to build-up play. He's been compared to the likes of Guardiola, but in truth he resembles more of an Ange Postecoglou due to the fact that Feyenoord build up in a very narrow 2-2 structure, similar to Ange, but there's a key difference. With Spurs, both fullbacks invert, but Slot has just one fullback inverting, which is Geertruida, who comes in to form that box, and then you've got two wider players who hold the width. You've got the right wing dropping back, you've got the left back who goes wide, and the other CDM, which is usually Weaver, comes back next to Geertruida. Now, the right wing dropping is very similar to how Kulusevski drops deep to act as a wing back, and the right wing is usually Minter. And just focusing in on Geertruida, I don't think any of the analysis I've seen on Slot so far fully grasps just how pivotal he is to the fluidity of Feyenoord on the ball and the solidity of it. He acts as a double pivot in possession, but then as the ball progresses into the opposition half, he becomes almost like a Kante-esque box-to-box midfielder, shuttling down the right half space, providing that inside support to Minter, and once the ball is lost, he usually has the tenacity and endurance to get himself back into right back. Now, he's played in other positions too, but there's no doubt that right back is his proper role. But it begs the question, what would be Liverpool's answer to Geertruida? Well, on the surface, it seems that Trent Alexander-Arnold seems like a godsend for a Slot type of manager. He's an inverted fullback who loves to be part of the midfield, but is he as disciplined as a Geertruida in possession? Well, Trent fires 6 times as many long passes, and that makes him a bit of a loose cannon in the build-up. Now, that suits Klopp because Trent's, he's mentioned in his recent interview on the overlap, losses of possession provide a brilliant chance to counter-press, and Klopp tends to encourage it. But as we see from Geertruida's numbers, he is used more as a supplementary controlling figure. Hence, he averages about 92% pass accuracy. So he's more like a Rico Lewis type of fullback who helps with the overall controlling of the game. Slot doesn't really want his fullbacks to be too risky with the ball. Then, of course, you've got the likes of Conor Bradley waiting in the wings. Now, due to his youth, he seems more of a mouldable individual who's got that dynamism of a Geertruida, if not more so. And he looks comfortable when he does invert, so there's glimpses of his potential in that area. But he's got something new as well, which is obviously he is brilliant on the overlap. So he could become an even more well-rounded version of a Geertruida and a potential evolution for how Slot approaches the all-rounder fullback role that's so vital to his tactics. In terms of other characteristics of the build-up, as with any other possession manager worth their salt, having a ball-playing keeper is obviously going to be essential for Slot, and his keeper forms that back three in possession at times, very Brighton-esque. Both centre-backs can drop very deep, almost parallel to the keeper, and invite the press. And they're primarily looking to find the double pivot in midfield of Geertruida and Weaver. Now, this pentagon or square structure can be pretty narrow, and if I was looking to set up against it, I'd advise a 4-2-2-2 structure to get in as many bodies in that central zone, make Feyenoord feel as uncomfortable as possible. Now, Feyenoord look to play short pretty much all the time, although when they are forced to go long, there's an element of thought behind it. Rarely do you ever see panicked punt under pressure. Now, also worth noting, statistically, they're the most press-resistant team in the Eredivisie, and yet they're not overindulgent like a Guardiola side. They have very few touches in their own third, so Slot clearly likes to move the ball quickly from back to front, a trait that Liverpool fans will appreciate as aficionados of heavy metal football. Key to this press resistance is the highly touted Weaver, a spinal component in the style of Feyenoord. He's very natural at picking the ball up in deeper areas, reminiscent of a young Julian Weigl under Tuchel, and able to spin his way out of pressure and connect well with one-touch wall passes into wider areas. In some games where the right back remains a bit wider, he is left isolated in that 6th area. But nevertheless, I've not really seen him overwhelmed when that situation occurs. Outside of the build-up, he gets forward too, and he's able to affect play outside of his own half. So he's a bit of a Rodri in that respect, an all-rounded central midfielder who can thrive in the pivot region and start the play. Feyenoord are the team that uses the switch of play least in the Eredivisie, whereas PSV are in the top 4 for stretches of play. And that's in stark contrast to Liverpool, which is more like Bosch. They use switches of play really, really well, whereas when you compare them to the likes of Man City, Arsenal, they tend to keep their passes short.
Track-backing numbers to defence on the turn, forcing the save. Barkas.
So that covers Feyenoord's general approach to building up and keeping possession, but what about their attacking structure and style? For me, the key tactical fulcrum of Feyenoord's attack is Minter. He's the reference point in possession, the one with the fixed position out wide. Very similar to an Elise at Palace or Sane at Bayern. He drags that team from defence to attack. He injects momentum into the attack. He's able to accelerate from a standing start. And he doesn't really need an overlap to be effective. Now, if we compare his work rate with the ball to Mo Salah, for me that's a world of difference because Mo Salah doesn't carry the ball as often. And he's potentially a huge casualty if Slot wants to focus on his right flank being that engine room in terms of ball carry. So, with one winger providing the width, what does Slot seek to do with the other side? Well, we've alluded to the fact that unlike Ange, Slot doesn't really invert both his fullbacks and he likes his left back, which was Hartman before his major injury, to hold the width and enable his left winger to be more of an inside roaming playmaker, a bit like a Benrahma or a second striker. Now, since Hartman's injury, we've seen Slot use a mixture of Hanko moving in from left centre-back into that left-back role to give that left foot natural width down that left side, or even use Geertruida as an inverted left-back, but this means he instructs his left winger, which is usually Pexo, to hold that width more than usual. Now for me, Gakpo in theory would enjoy Slot's tactics more, but to be fair, even Luis Diaz, who's quite underrated from a pure playmaker point of view, could see a new license to roam and enjoy being more narrow and closer to the centre forward. On the flip side, if he uses Salah as his inside forward playmaker, he's going to need the right back to get up and get forward in a vertical sense. So Conor Bradley might enjoy that more than Trent Alexander-Arnold. And while that player holds the width, the left winger is going to need to be that incredibly dynamic wing merchant. Now someone like Nico Williams could be perfect to fill that role for Liverpool, and it would free up Salah to play closer to goal. Up front, Jimenez, pretty well-rounded forward, able to run the channels, drop deep, connect, stretch play. I think Slot enjoys having that IQ up front because it ties into his entire framework of interchanging control, intelligence in central areas. I think Gakpo is probably closer to fitting that description, but he might be able to evolve Núñez and make him more cultured, or he might just look for a new centre forward altogether. In terms of style, when it comes to shooting, Feyenoord rarely opt for long-range efforts. Instead, they seek to generate predominantly high-quality scoring chances, facilitated by this concerted effort to flood the box with bodies and encourage midfielders to join the attack. It's a bit of a hybrid of Man City and Liverpool. And this approach mirrors the fluid and aggressive style associated with Klopp, which is, high tempo, risk-taking, and not just waiting for the perfect tap-in, but at the same time, they're looking to create a plethora of tap-in type opportunities. Now, in terms of progressive passes through balls, it's the central area of the pitch, particularly where UEFA plays, where the majority of progressive passes are initiated, and that's the area which drives the game's progression compared to their league competitors. Now, in terms of crossing, it's evenly distributed from both flanks, and that reflects Slot's desire for balanced delivery. Feyenoord, they want both flanks to be delivering and producing in equal measure.
It's deep, and it's met by Trauner.
In terms of Feyenoord's defending, they boast the best XG against in the league, yet their defensive record remains second best behind PSV. So there's a slight disconnect between statistical expectations and on-field performance, and this discrepancy suggests potential areas for improvement, one of which is Feyenoord's goalkeeping save percentage, and that ranks a measly 11th in the league. In terms of structure, Feyenoord adopt a 4-2-3-1 formation with a cohesive pressing approach. The front four operates as a unified unit. Jimenez is the one that initiates the press, and they're then joined by one of the double pivot in midfield, which are freed up, and then they join in and the other midfielder sits in. And that defensive line remains high up the pitch, and together as a collective, they're aiming to suffocate opponents. That strategy is reflected by their intense press per defensive action of 9.53. In terms of their challenge intensity, it's pretty formidable. They boast the highest dual success rate in the league at 67.8%, and they rank 4th in terms of challenge intensity averaging 5.9 actions per minute of opposition possession, and that illustrates their proactive defensive approach. In terms of their aerial battle, they're pretty proficient. They lead the league in aerial duel success, and that shows that Slot's not just a slick tactical manager, he's someone who can put in the competitive fire into his team. And that aggressive pressing style with this ability to head the ball, that makes them very similar to Klopp's philosophy where they sweep up any long balls. Trauner in particular emerges as a standout with a league-leading win rate of 70% in the air. They are, however, structurally susceptible to counterattacks due to the fact that they leave a back two, out of possession because the rest of the team is pressing, quite similar to Liverpool, but Liverpool at their best, Konate, Matip, Van Dijk, they really are good at covering those wide spaces despite just leaving the two at the back, whereas a team like City leave three at the back. So that's something to look out for with Slot at Liverpool. Will he be able to still keep that back two and make it Premier League winning standard?
In conclusion, Slot is a manager who blends the philosophies of Guardiola, De Zerbi, Postecoglou and Klopp into a cohesive and entertaining brand of football. He doesn't seem like a man like Ten Hag, who didn't really shape the Ajax project single-handedly and has since failed to implement a coherent vision at United. Slot, whilst being a tactical magpie, is definitely wedded to principles such as possession, control and sustained creativity. But he's not as zealot like Bosch. Now, for me, the big test of his ability will be, can he build stable defences in the Premier League? The EPL will be a stiffer test of his rather audacious in possession shapes, which leave two defenders at the back. And it's going to be intriguing to see how he evolves this Liverpool side, which is in need of a revolution. Will he hold on to the older players and give them a new lease of life? Or will he dramatically overhaul this Liverpool side? For me, a Slot team based on the current squad would be Alisson, back four of Bradley, Konate, Van Dijk, possibly Trent inverting from left back, Endo, McAllister base with Shabo licensed to roam in the 10 region, and then you've got a front three of Salah, Gakpo and Diaz holding up with down the left. Now in the long term, what you're looking for is potentially Alisson, back four of Trent at right back or even Bradley, Konate, Van Dijk, a new left back who can really bomb on, a new CDM who's a bit like a Weaver, a bit of a Rodri, can defend, can control, can do a bit of everything. Then maybe Shabo and Mac ahead of them. And then you're going to need almost a new front three because you're going to need younger players than a Mo Salah. You're going to need a young dynamic winger. I mentioned like a Nico Williams potentially on the left. And potentially if Núñez doesn't live up to the hype or Gakpo fails to kick on, then you're potentially going to need a new centre forward too. Now, how good Slot can become is a tough question to answer. The fact that he's failed, for example, in Europe to beat Roma back to back does raise questions as to his overall ceiling, but I do think he's going to be more successful than Ten Hag at implementing a cohesive brand of football at domestic level, even if it doesn't yield major silverware. He does seem to be a man of principle, and in that nurturing environment at Liverpool with the support of the like of Edwards, I would suspect Liverpool to handle that post-Klopp transition better than United did under Moyes. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, subscribe, and see you guys again next time. Bye.